The night my own family labeled me the black sheep, the air at the dinner table felt heavier than the crystal chandelier above us. I had walked into that house with a calm smile, wearing a simple dress, carrying nothing but a quiet confidence no one there could recognize. They saw what they wanted to see. A woman who married young. A woman who stepped away from the spotlight. A woman they decided was a failure. The dinner started politely, but politeness in my family never lasted long. Plates clinked, wine poured, and then the comments began. My cousin laughed first, casually asking if I was still hopping between small projects. My brother followed, shaking his head as if he felt sorry for me. Even my parents joined in, suggesting I should learn from others at the table who had real careers and real success. Then came the word that sliced deeper than they realized. Black sheep. The table erupted in soft chuckles, the kind that pretend to be harmless. My hands trembled under the table, nails digging into my palm. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I stayed silent. Not because I agreed with them, but because explaining myself would have been pointless. People who enjoy humiliating you never listen to your truth. They spoke about money, influence, and power as if I had none. What they did not know was that every insult landed on a woman who had built something far greater than their shallow applause. While they judged my quiet life, I had been laying foundations, signing deals, creating an empire in silence. An empire that did not need validation. As dessert was served, my mother leaned closer and whispered that I should stop dreaming and ask for help before it was too late. I nodded, swallowing the pain along with my pride. They thought they had broken me that night. What they did not know was this. That dinner was not my downfall. It was the final proof that staying silent had been the smartest move I ever made. And very soon, the same people laughing at me would be knocking on my door, desperate for the help they once mocked. I left that house with my head held high, but the moment I sat in my car, the tears finally spilled. Not loud sobs, just silent ones that blurred the lights of the street ahead. I let myself feel the pain for exactly 5 minutes. Then I wiped my face, straightened my posture, and drove home to the life they knew nothing about. By the next morning, their voices still echoed in my head, but instead of breaking me, they fueled me. Every insult replayed like a reminder of why I chose silence. I was not hiding. I was protecting what I built. Power grows best when no one is watching. At home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from my assistant. Updates from legal teams. Numbers that most people only see in magazines. I reviewed contracts while sipping coffee, calm and focused. The same hands that shook under the dinner table were now signing approvals that moved millions. This was my real world, one my family never bothered to ask about. Years earlier, when I walked away from the family business, they assumed I failed. What they never questioned was why investors followed me, why partners trusted me, why my name carried weight in rooms they would never enter. I let them believe their version of the story because it kept me free. Later that week, I attended a private meeting downtown. No cameras. No announcements. Just results. As I listened to projections climb higher than expected, I smiled to myself. If my family could see this moment, they would not recognize me. Not because I had changed, but because they never truly knew me. That night, a notification caught my attention. A news alert about a financial shakeup involving companies tied closely to my family. Stock values dipping. Deals stalling. I read the article slowly, carefully. This was only the beginning. The ground beneath them was starting to crack, and they had no idea how deep the fall would be. I closed my phone and looked out the window, city lights glowing like quiet witnesses. I was not angry anymore. I was prepared. Because when their world finally collapsed, they would remember the woman they called a failure. And they would realize too late that she was the only one who could save them. The first call came sooner than I expected. Not a plea, not yet, just confusion masked as confidence. My brother left a voicemail asking if I had seen the market news, laughing it off as a temporary setback. I deleted it without replying. Silence had always been my strongest response. Over the next few days, the cracks widened. Family group chats that once ignored me suddenly became active. Articles were shared. Rumors whispered. My name was mentioned indirectly, carefully, as if saying it out loud might shift the balance of power. I watched it all from a distance, untouched, unmoved. Inside my office, the atmosphere was completely different. Strategy meetings ran late into the night. Screens glowed with data, forecasts, and expansion plans. While my family struggled to hold together what they had inherited, I was building what I earned. Every decision I made years ago was paying off now, stacking quietly, relentlessly. I remembered the dinner table. The laughter. The pity in their eyes. The way they spoke about success as if it belonged to them by birthright. They never understood that real strength is built in isolation, when no one is clapping and everyone doubts you. Another alert flashed on my phone. One of their major partners had pulled out. The reason was vague, but I knew the truth. The industry had shifted, and they were unprepared. They relied on old names and older reputations. I relied on results. That evening, my mother finally called. Her voice sounded different. Softer. Careful. She asked how I had been, as if the last dinner never happened. I answered politely, keeping my tone steady, my emotions guarded. She hinted that the family might need guidance, maybe even support, from unexpected places. Unexpected. I almost smiled. After the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This was the moment I had prepared for, not out of revenge, but out of truth. They were about to learn the value of the one they pushed aside. And when they finally asked for my help openly, it would not be on their terms. It would be on mine. The pressure on my family escalated fast, far faster than they could control. Within weeks, what they called a temporary dip turned into a public collapse. Meetings were cancelled. Credit lines froze. Longtime employees started resigning, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. Their empire, built on reputation and comfort, was bleeding in plain sight. I watched from afar, not with joy, but with a strange calm. Every headline felt heavy, because no matter how they treated me, they were still my family. Yet the memory of that dinner kept returning, sharper each time. The humiliation. The silence they forced on me. The way they decided my worth without ever asking the truth. One evening, my father showed up at my door unannounced. The man who once spoke over me now stood there unsure, his shoulders slumped, his confidence gone. He did not step inside at first. He just looked at me as if seeing a stranger who somehow held all the answers he no longer had. He spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. The banks were closing in. Investors were demanding guarantees. Lawsuits were forming behind closed doors. He admitted they were running out of time. Then came the pause. The moment that hurt more than the insults ever did. He said they might have been wrong about me. I let him talk. I let the truth spill out without interruption. Years of pride collapsed in his voice, and with it, the illusion that they had everything under control. When he finally asked for my help, it did not sound like a request. It sounded like surrender. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the dark, replaying every choice I had made. I could help them and erase their mistakes, or I could let them fall and prove a point. Either way, the power rested with me now. And for the first time in my life, my family was afraid of losing me, not because I was weak, but because I was the only one strong enough to decide their fate. Sleep abandoned me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, weighed down by a decision that felt heavier than any contract I had ever signed. Helping them would mean reopening wounds I had spent years healing. Refusing would mean watching everything they built collapse, knowing I had the power to stop it. Neither choice felt clean. Neither felt easy. By morning, my phone was full. Missed calls from my mother. Messages from cousins who had not spoken to me in years. Their words were careful, respectful, almost rehearsed. The same people who laughed at me now measured every sentence, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Desperation has a way of teaching manners quickly. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. Not at the old family house. Not at a place filled with memories of judgment and shame. I chose a neutral boardroom downtown, cold and professional. When they arrived, one by one, I could feel the shift. They avoided my eyes. The confidence they once wore like armor was gone. I laid out the reality without raising my voice. Their finances were tangled. Their leadership outdated. Their refusal to adapt had led them here. No blame, no insults, just facts. Each sentence landed like a weight they could no longer lift. For the first time, they listened. Truly listened. My brother tried to interrupt, old habits resurfacing, but my mother stopped him. That moment said everything. The family hierarchy had changed, and everyone in that room knew it. I was no longer the one being judged. I was the one being evaluated as their last hope. Then I told them the truth they were not ready to hear. Helping them would not mean saving their pride. It would mean losing control. It would mean following my strategy, my rules, and my vision. No shortcuts. No interference. Complete transparency. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, my father nodded. His eyes were tired, humbled. He agreed. As the meeting ended, I realized something powerful. I was not seeking revenge anymore. I was reclaiming respect. And whether they survived this downfall or not, one thing was certain. They would never call me the black sheep again. The moment I stepped into their crumbling world, everything changed. I did not arrive as a daughter or a sister. I arrived as a leader. The first week was brutal. I ordered audits that exposed years of hidden mistakes. I paused projects they were emotionally attached to and cut partnerships they once bragged about at family gatherings. Every decision felt like pulling out rotten roots, painful but necessary. Resistance surfaced quickly. Old habits die hard, especially when pride is involved. My brother questioned my approach in private meetings, hinting that I was being too aggressive. I shut it down calmly, reminding him that aggression was what saved companies from drowning. He had no response, only silence. Late nights became routine. I slept in my office more than at home, fueled by cold coffee and relentless focus. While my family struggled to accept their new reality, I rebuilt from the inside out. Systems were replaced. Leadership roles shifted. Loyalty was no longer inherited. It was earned. Then came the moment that tested everything. A major investor demanded a personal meeting, threatening to pull out completely. This investor had once dismissed me at a conference years ago, barely acknowledging my presence. Now, they sat across from me, studying every word, every pause. I laid out a recovery plan so precise it left no room for doubt. Numbers spoke louder than promises. By the end of the meeting, the threat turned into cautious support. The deal held. When the news reached my family, the relief was visible, but so was the fear. They were beginning to understand how close they had come to losing everything. Yet not everyone was grateful. Whispers started. Some relatives suggested I was enjoying this too much. That I was proving a point. They still misunderstood me. This was not about revenge. This was about survival. As another crisis loomed on the horizon, I realized the hardest part was yet to come. Saving the business was one thing. Changing how my family saw me was another battle entirely, and that battle was far from over. Just when the recovery started to look stable, the past struck back harder than anyone expected. A legal notice landed on the table like a silent bomb. One of the old deals my family had buried years ago was resurfacing, and this time it had teeth. Penalties. Public exposure. A deadline that gave us barely weeks to respond. The room froze when I read it aloud. Faces drained of color. This was not a problem money alone could fix. This was reputation. The very thing they had relied on for decades. If this exploded, everything I rebuilt would collapse overnight, and so would the last shred of their credibility. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting, hoping, fearing. This was the moment they truly understood the weight I carried. I asked for complete access to every hidden file, every sealed agreement, every decision they were ashamed to admit. Some hesitated. That hesitation almost cost them everything. I made it clear. One lie, one omission, and I would walk away. Not dramatically. Permanently. That night, alone in the office, I uncovered the truth. A signature that should never have been signed. A shortcut taken to protect appearances. The irony was bitter. The same obsession with image that made them humiliate me had now cornered them with no escape. I worked through the night, crafting a counterstrike that balanced law, negotiation, and leverage. It was risky. If it failed, my name would be dragged down with theirs. For the first time, I questioned whether saving them was worth risking the empire I built in silence. At dawn, my mother called. Her voice broke as she apologized, not just for the dinner, but for years of doubt, comparison, and blindness. She admitted they never tried to understand me because it was easier to judge. I ended the call without promises. As the sun rose, I sent the proposal that could either end the crisis or ignite a bigger war. My finger hovered for a second before pressing send. Because once this move was made, there would be no turning back. The response arrived faster than expected. Too fast. That alone told me how dangerous my move had been. The opposing side did not reject the proposal. They asked for a meeting. In person. No lawyers. No delays. That was never a good sign, but it was the only opening we had. The meeting took place in a quiet high-rise office overlooking the city. As I walked in, I felt the weight of everything on my shoulders. My family's future. My own reputation. The empire I built in silence. One wrong word could shatter all of it. They tested me from the first minute. Subtle threats wrapped in polite language. References to media exposure. Suggestions that cooperation would be easier if I stepped aside and let older names handle things. I did not flinch. I laid out the consequences they would face if this went public, backed by documentation they did not expect me to have. That was when the tone shifted. Hours passed. Tension thickened. Finally, they offered a settlement. Costly, humiliating, but survivable. It would keep the scandal contained. It would also require someone to take responsibility publicly. Not legally, but symbolically. When I brought this back to my family, the room fell silent. They understood what it meant. A public apology. An admission of mismanagement. A fall from the pedestal they had guarded their entire lives. No one spoke. No one volunteered. I looked around the table and felt the old pain rise again. The dinner. The laughter. The word black sheep. For a moment, I considered letting them face the consequences alone. Instead, I made my position clear. I would not take the fall for their mistakes. I would guide them through it, but they would face the truth themselves. If they wanted my protection, they had to accept accountability. That night, my father finally broke. He admitted that losing control scared him more than losing money. He admitted that underestimating me was the greatest mistake of his life. The agreement was ready. The public fallout was inevitable. The final test was coming, and this time, there would be no hiding from the truth. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 10 in the morning, every major outlet was already waiting. Cameras lined the entrance. Headlines were pre-written, ready to destroy or redefine a legacy. Inside the building, my family sat in silence, dressed in suits that felt more like armor than confidence. I stood a few steps behind them, exactly where I chose to be. Not hidden. Not exposed. Present. The same woman they once dismissed was now the reason this moment even existed. When my father stepped up to the podium, his hands shook. He spoke slowly, admitting mistakes, acknowledging mismanagement, and taking responsibility for decisions that nearly ruined everything. There were no excuses. No deflections. Just truth. Each sentence stripped away years of arrogance, and with it, the illusion of perfection they had sold to the world. The backlash was immediate but controlled. Stocks dipped, then stabilized. Partners hesitated, then stayed. The settlement held. The storm passed without destroying the foundation I had rebuilt. It was not a victory parade. It was survival earned the hard way. In the days that followed, the tone inside the family shifted completely. Conversations became careful, respectful. Decisions were no longer made without my input. The dinner table, once a place of humiliation, turned quiet, almost reverent. They watched me differently now, not with pity, but with recognition. One evening, as we sat together again, my mother reached for my hand. She did not speak. She did not need to. The apology was in her eyes. My brother lowered his head, finally acknowledging the truth he avoided for years. I realized then that revenge was never the ending I wanted. Respect was. Understanding was. And most of all, freedom from the need to prove myself. I left that house later that night, the same way I had months ago. Calm. Composed. Unburdened. But this time, the tears did not come. Because the black sheep they mocked was the one who saved them. And the failure they laughed at became the foundation of their second chance.